Hello, it's Katelyn Ilkani with the Tambellini Group. Today is March 17th, and Ray and I are back to give you an update about what's happening in higher ed. So the last time we did a video, we introduced who the Tambellini Group is. We're an analyst firm. And today, as we kick off, Ray and I are going to tell you a little bit more about us. I lead the client services team at the Tambellini Group and also our cybersecurity research practice. I have a master's in public health from Berkeley. So this new pandemic is something that I studied quite a bit, pandemics, as I got my public health degree and following it quite closely now. And Ray, who's joining me today, has been in higher ed for quite some time and can really talk to the perspective of an executive leader in the space. So Ray, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Raechelle Clemmons. Everybody calls me Ray. I've been at the Tambellini Group now for a couple of months as the VP of Industry Relations. But immediately prior to coming to Tambellini, I was a higher ed CIO for the last 10 years. So I have a very deep perspective and a lot of friends still in the higher education community. And I'm following very closely what's happening at institutions and on the ground, especially from the technology and the CIO perspective.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
We have another PowerPoint to share with you today to give you an update about what's been changing in the higher ed space as this COVID-19 pandemic has continued. So I'm going to share our PowerPoint with you.
And while Katelyn's getting that set up, I think, if there's any theme to be had here, it's really about kind of the peeling back the layers of onion here. I think about the Shrek movie where Shrek says ogres are like onions, they have many layers. And so this is really that, I think, in a nutshell, is that as one layer of the onion gets peeled back and exposed, there are several layers beneath that institutions are starting to face. Katelyn?
Thanks, Ray. So the big theme, in addition to us peeling back the onion, that we've been seeing since the last time we did a video at the end of last week is that we're still really in a time of chaos. We're seeing institutions saying things like, we just aren't set up for this move to complete remote teaching, students scattering back to their homes, and this idea that there's a sense of urgency to get students out of the dorms. There's a real worry about there being institutional spread in dorms on campuses. So asking students, please get out of campus, move out really quickly. And it's really upending the whole higher ed system and causing a lot of stress among students, faculty, and staff. There's a quote here on this first slide that I included around, this is really just organized chaos right now. People feel very unprepared. So as we go into this transition, one of the things that's coming up a lot is a concern about grades. Students are sharing that they may have to go home now and take care of children or take care of parents. And this idea that they can just go from being in school to having the same schedule at home when so many things about their home life are changing is unrealistic. Another topic that's been coming up a lot on social media is that institutions should be thinking about shifting the expectations for grading. This is not a typical situation. Perhaps institutions should be thinking about just offering a pass to all of the students for the semester or no record. MIT has already come out and said that they're going to do all of their spring courses as a pass. So they're leading the pack here and taking some of the stress off.
As institutions are facing the here and now, they're also starting to think about a little bit about what's going to happen just after this. And so this, I think, is a great tweet from Kyle Johnson, who talks a little bit about, are students going to be able to sit for the SATs or ACTs? And if they can't, what does that mean for institutions? We've already seen a move in higher education for some institutions to go to a test optional environment or admissions requirement. And so this might be another outcome that we see of this. I don't think we know yet. We do know that institutions are starting to have these conversations, maybe not so much on the test optional, but certainly about admissions cycles and admissions timing. So are they going to require all their deposits by May 1st, for example, or are those deadlines going to get extended because folks have other things that are just top of mind for them right now? It is, the continuity here is pretty disrupted. I think really the focus is on continuity. These are a couple of tweets that we pulled that really just talk about the impact. The first to the IT team, really thinking about the number of tickets, the number of interactions, the online, Zoom sessions that institutions are running to try to get their user base up to speed and ready to go. I'm on a CIO chat group that was talking all across the weekend. So people are working really 24/7 to get their institutions ready for this. And then the question is, are the services going to be ready? So as everybody shifts online, is your home Wi-Fi any better than a public Wi-Fi in a coffee house? Are the major web conferencing services going to be able to handle this huge spike in volume as everybody makes this shift? So institutions and home workers and the entire country, and in some cases the entire some parts of the planet are making this shift. Are they ready? Is the infrastructure in place to support it? And then is the security in place to support it? Are people thinking about and talking about the security implications of this? So it's a pretty big deal, I think, for institutions. The other thing that folks are talking about, and this graphic has been circulating on Twitter and I'm sure other parts of the internet as well, is just what's the reality of this? We started this semester, everybody had these beautiful plans for how amazing the teaching and learning was going to be. All of a sudden there was this shift to having to think about this idea of remote teaching. We have some very quickly formed remote teaching plans, and what is that actually going to look like in reality? And I think people just need to be super patient, give themselves a little bit of a break, but also recognize, again, this is not online teaching and learning at its finest. This is contingency planning. This is continuity of teaching and learning. This is not, online learning. And so, as Katelyn said earlier, what does that mean in terms of grades? What does that mean in terms of testing? Do you even have to test, or you think about different ways to assess learning? Are you thinking about the implications for how your students are impacted by this, and maybe not doing synchronous learning, choosing asynchronous methods instead, so that people can work this into everything else that's going on in their lives at the same moment. So just really thinking about a lot of flexibility in this, and not holding yourself to too high of standards, just sort of recognizing this is, we've got to figure out how to make do in this crisis situation.
We're also seeing a lot of red tape happening as institutions are making this shift. So there's red tape for faculty and staff. Just in the past few days, we've seen some tweets coming out about this idea that if a faculty member or a staff member wants to go work from home, they have to fill out forms. They have to tell the institution exactly what their responsibilities are going to be while teleworking, which is very onerous in this time of stress for people to do, and it feels very outdated. So it's causing some frustration among faculty and staff that they're being asked to make all these changes so quickly, and at the same time they have to stop and fill out all of this red tape. So we're encouraging institutions not only to think through the continuity plans and this idea of how are they going to get their classes online, but also how are you going to take care of your faculty and staff, and make sure that people can focus on getting the most important tasks accomplished, as opposed to having to keep some of the same processes in place that maybe would have made sense when we weren't in a pandemic or crisis situation. That brings us to mitigating the impact. We are seeing some leaders really step up to mitigate the impact on the whole community. The University of Nebraska president, Ted Carter, told all of the employees of the University of Nebraska, whether they're full, part-time, temporary, or student workers, that they're going to get 80 hours of paid leave in order to self-quarantine, to care for someone with COVID-19, or to deal with childcare during this time. So that is really a great service because so many people, we're seeing a lot of talk right now, not just about, let's make sure the campus keeps running, but let's make sure that our lives can keep going on. How are we going to take care of ourselves? So taking the stress off of the campus and remembering that we're all people is so important during this time.
A nice gesture by University of Nebraska. Good job.
We're also seeing some discussion of what if we just ended the terms? Is it completely out of the question to say, actually, we're not going to worry about shifting to online learning. We're going to say this is an extraordinary circumstance and end the term. And so this tweet from David Madden came out yesterday. And in response, someone said, well, this may work in the UK or in Europe, but in the US, if an institution ends the term, they may decide not to pay their faculty, regardless of if that faculty member is continuing research or writing. If they're not actually teaching, they may not be eligible to be paid. So that's another consideration that needs to be really thought through. How do we take care of our students and staff? And should institutions really be thinking about maybe the right thing to do is to end the term?
And so we know at least one institution, Berea, ended their term. They looked at the types of students that they served and the potential impact of their students, and they just didn't feel like they could ensure enough continuity for their students. And they decided that that was it, that they were done, or at least that's my understanding. And then the interesting thing is I've actually seen this a little bit locally here in Texas. Our governor just announced, I think yesterday, that they are going to waive STAR testing this year. So there is, whether that means that they'll end the semester for K through 12 students or not, it does mean that they're not going to require the typical kind of end of year testing that they would. So they're giving consideration to the idea that something like this could and may very well need to happen. So, the wonderful thing about higher education, and the thing that I think I value the most about this community, is that it is in fact a community. We have seen in non-pandemic situations and just everyday life, this community really be collaborative and work together and come together to solve problems. There are just numerous listservs that exist in this community, and that certainly is not an exception here, but the level of community building that has happened in this crisis has been just unbelievable. I think last time we talked about the instructional continuity thread, which was a perfect example of that. Here are a few tweets. People are offering up their services, their expertise. Kristen Anderfull says, I've got 20 years of experience in online learning. If you need help, I'm here to help you. I know Tanya Justin, who's a online teaching and learning expert, has done the same thing. People are creating shared resources. They are participating on listserv discussions. Like I said, I'm in a CIO chat group where folks are talking to each other about where to go. I actually saw somebody step in yesterday and contact a contact they had at a company that wasn't getting a response to another institution in time, and kind of expedite that process. So people are just really coming together in a big way, and dare I say, beautiful in the face of this crisis, in a beautiful way, to really help each other out and show that we're all in this together, which I think is amazing. And that includes the vendor community, actually. So again, my role is industry relations. A good chunk of the work that I do here at Tambellini Group is working with the vendor community for higher education and really helping them. And we've seen vendors step up. Some of the big web conferencing solutions were the first to announce reductions in caps or eliminations of caps. They're looking at extensions of their service to people who weren't members or who weren't clients before. Other vendors have added on features and functionality that normally would have been extra. They're switching licensing models to help support institutions who used to have like an on-premise need and an on-premise license, and now they have a virtual need or a virtual work at home license. And so organizations have stepped up to do that. The one thing that institutions are now asking for, probably beyond everything else, is just vendors to recognize if we don't have a relationship with you already, we're not going to start one in the middle of this crisis. You know, you might have a great product, but we don't have the time, the capacity, the bandwidth. We are literally firefighting at this moment. So please stop the calls, stop the inquiries, stop the drop bys in cases where that happens, and please just know that we know you're out there. If we need you, we'll reach out. But we only can focus on so much right now. We don't need the added distraction.
That's all for our talk today. Ray and I will be back on Friday with a recap of the week. We hope everyone stays safe and healthy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.